You're watching Local 4, home of ClickOnDetroit.com. WTIV Local 4 News at 5 starts now.
Any reaction at all?
Kwame Kilpatrick, stunned and speechless.
Not at this time. I don't have any comment.
Guilty of racketeering, extortion, and that's not all. His buddy, Bobby Ferguson.
It's a temporary situation.
Also guilty, but maintaining his faith.
God is good all the time. My faith ain't changed now.
While Father Bernard Kilpatrick escapes with just one conviction and continues standing by his son.
What about your son taking millions of dollars from our city? What about Bobby Ferguson?
He didn't take a dime.
He didn't take a dime? He was found guilty, sir.
Kwame didn't take a dime.
This afternoon, the last time we'll see Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson as free men for many years.
That's right. It tops our news at 5. It was their last taste of freedom because late this afternoon, a federal judge ruled they'd be held in custody until their sentencing. They were taken to Milan this afternoon. Now, the only one who remains free is Bernard Kilpatrick. He was only found guilty on one charge. But the jury found Kwame Kilpatrick guilty on 24 of 30 counts, and Bobby Ferguson guilty on 9 of 11. The entire Local 4 News team is covering this breaking story from every angle. We begin right now with Local 4 defender Kevin Dietz. Kevin, quite a day here today.
Kwame Kilpatrick handcuffed in the courtroom and hauled off to prison, convicted on 24 separate felony counts that will put him in prison for 15 to 20 years. His sentence started today. Kwame Kilpatrick had it all. Detroit's youngest mayor ready to make his mark. Keys to the Manoogian mansion, a private security detail, and over $150,000 a year in salary. It wasn't enough. Kwame Kilpatrick wanted more, much more. Private jets, walking around money, trips to Vegas, and $4,000 suits. To get it, he extorted businesses, saying pay up or no work. They paid up, giving the mayor hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes, clothes, and vacations. It still wasn't enough. Kilpatrick demanding huge donations to his civic fund, supposedly for the kids of Detroit. The only kids who benefited were his own, with free camps. Kwame used the Kilpatrick Civic Fund for vacations with his girlfriend, vacations with his family, golf clubs, yoga, and more. Still not enough. He made his fundraiser, MAB, cough up half her commissions, hundreds of thousands of dollars in kickbacks. Today, the jury said that's enough. Guilty, guilty, guilty. 24 times they said guilty to racketeering, extortion, wire fraud, tax evasion. The convictions carrying a penalty of 20 years. Kilpatrick looked like he was run over by a truck as he came out of the courthouse. Mr. Kilpatrick.
How you feel?
What do you have to say, sir?
Everybody back.
Your wife in here?
How you
Gotta
feel?
go back. Any reaction at all?
Not at this
Everybody
time.
needs to go back. You admit it now, Quan? 5, 6, 7.
Not at this time. I don't have any comment.
But the judge wasn't finished. At a bond hearing just hours later, she said, close call, but there's too much missing money. Kwame's lied too many times to the courts, to probation officers. Bond is denied. Take the prisoner into custody. Kilpatrick took off his sport coat, took off his cufflinks, handed his driver's license to his mother, put his hands behind his back, and was handcuffed and hauled away. His attorney, Jim Thomas.
It's judicial discretion. The standard is very high. The case law is against us.
There was no outcry from supporters, just sadness that the kid, with all that potential, threw it all away, ripping off taxpayers for millions in much-needed city money to live large like the hip-hop mayor nickname he was given. Kwame Kilpatrick left the courthouse in handcuffs. He is already down at Milan Prison, where he will stay until sentencing day. He then will stay there likely in that same prison for the remainder of his sentence, which is 15 to 20 years. There was no celebration here around the courthouse. Nobody was clapping or cheering that Kilpatrick was convicted. There also is no outcry from Kilpatrick's supporters that he was wronged in some way. Most everybody sort of just sighing and looking at this at the end of a very long and ugly chapter in the history of Detroit, hoping for better days ahead. Reporting live at the federal courthouse, Kevin Dietz, Defenders.
Now, Kevin, we were watching this, I know, pretty much throughout the entire day, and we didn't get a sense that perhaps Jim Thomas had not prepared Kwame Kilpatrick for the stunning guilty verdicts that he received today.
Well, he came in today hoping for an acquittal. That did not happen. He knew it was a possibility that he would be convicted for sure I'm not sure that he thought he would be sent to prison immediately.
Right.
It's very rare for corruption cases to end this way, where the guilty party is locked up and sent to prison immediately. Usually they are allowed to go free and spend time with their family. That judge saying it was a close call, but in this case, there's just too many questions, too much of a possibility that Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson might try and flee the country. She was not going to allow that to happen. She ordered them locked up today, and that's the way this story came to a tragic end.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Kevin.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Well, Kwame Kilpatrick's longtime friend, and we can now say partner in crime, will also remain in custody. After the verdicts, Bobby Ferguson maintained his innocence, saying it's not over yet. But both Ferguson and Kilpatrick today, it marked the end of the road. Let's get to local 4 defender Karen Drew for a look at the case against Bobby Ferguson. Karen?
You know, Carmen, when you take a look at the case of Bobby Ferguson, it is similar to Kwame Kilpatrick. He started out as a minority contractor in the city. He took part in construction of Comerica Park, Ford Field, volunteered to tear down abandoned houses to make the city better. That's not what the jury believed, though, about this man. They believed he did take part in steering some $83 million in contracts towards his company, Ferguson Enterprises. And now Bobby Ferguson sits in prison. As Bobby Ferguson made his way into court this morning, he wasn't talking much except to quote Bible verses.
My statement is from the Bible.
Okay.
Psalms 37, verses 1 through 40. Read that. That's my statement.
He seemed confident and strong when walking into the courtroom. He actually high-fived some inside. But once the verdict was read, the mood changed. The contractor was found guilty of 9 of 11 counts, including extortion, bribery, and racketeering. He could be sentenced up to 20 years. Jurors believe Ferguson and Kilpatrick took part in an intricate scheme of extorting those who did business in the city of Detroit for their financial gain.
They looked at each piece of evidence individually and each count individually, and they made their decision accordingly, and we have to live with that. Even though, you know, we respectfully disagree, it is what it is.
Walking out of court, a rush of reporters surround the longtime Kilpatrick friend and contractor. He again doesn't talk, except to quote a Bible verse again.
God is good all the time.
During the bond hearing later in the day, the prosecution stated Ferguson was a flight risk. He had $83 million in ill-gotten gains, had pistol whipped someone in the past, traveled to South Africa, Ghana, and Saudi Arabia, and could not be trusted to be out on bond and was a flight risk. The judge agreed. When the marshals approached Kilpatrick and Ferguson, both men took their jackets off, belts and cufflinks off as well. Kilpatrick took his license out of his pocket, handed it to his mother, and said to Ferguson, quote, "We won't need this where we are going." And that is right. When speaking to Ferguson outside of court, he mentioned numerous times Bible verses. When speaking to his attorney, he said he has a strong faith, and now he must rely on that faith for the next questionable amount of years. Of course, we'll have to wait until sentencing day. Back to you.
Now, Karen, when you talked with Bobby Ferguson earlier in the day, he said it's not over yet. What do you think he meant by that?
You know, it's interesting. I really believe that he didn't feel that he would be found guilty. And then when he was found guilty, he didn't feel that he would be sent to jail. You know, obviously there's talk of whether or not there would be an appeal, but it's just this strange aura that they still feel like they're not giving up. So, I mean, that's all I can surmise, you know, is that perhaps maybe his hope of an appeal, but insiders tell me that would be quite unlikely.
And certainly premature on a day like today. Our Karen Drew reporting for us live. Thank you, Karen. Well, Bernard Kilpatrick faced a total of 4 charges, the most serious being racketeering conspiracy. The jury was unable to reach a verdict on that count, but he was found not guilty of attempted extortion in connection to a sludge contract.
Well, Bernard was on a roll early, also found not guilty of filing a false tax return in 2004. But the jury did find Bernard Kilpatrick guilty of having a false tax return in 2005. That was his one and only conviction. After the verdicts were announced, Bernard Kilpatrick made no mention of his own fate, but maintained his son Kwame's innocence.
Mr. Kilpatrick, your reaction today to those not guilties and non-decisions? You said you felt good going out. How do you feel now?
Terrible.
Terrible for your son?
Absolutely.
Yes. You think the jury got it wrong?
Absolutely.
What about your son taking millions of dollars from our city? What about Bobby Ferguson?
He didn't take a dime.
He didn't take a dime? He was found guilty, sir.
Kwame didn't take a dime.
Then who took the money? Yeah, you were found guilty, sir. Any comment?
So tonight, while Kwame Kilpatrick is in federal prison, Bernard Kilpatrick will remain free until his sentencing. A date for that hearing has not yet been set.
Well, joining us now is U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid and Bob Foley, a special agent in charge of the Detroit Division. You heard Father Bernard Kilpatrick coming out of after the verdicts were read and saying Kwame didn't take a dime. How do you respond to that?
Well, the jury has responded, I think, in their verdict. The jury found the defendants guilty on some of the most serious charges. Kwame Kilpatrick, the evidence showed that he took $840,000 of unexplained income into his bank accounts. That's what we can account for. It also shows that he sent $83 million worth of extorted contracts to Bobby Ferguson. So I submit that the jury has answered that question, that he took a lot more than a dime.
All right. And Bob, your thoughts on the stunning verdicts today? Guilty on the most serious of charges?
Guilty on the most serious of charges, and the right result. We worked diligently between all of the investigators and the prosecution team to ensure the right result was reached, and all the evidence pointed to what the jury found, and that is guilty.
In putting this case together, what surprised you most? Did the text messages, the volume of text messages that were available to you or to the government, did that assist you in putting this case together?
It certainly did. You know, the case like this relies on a lot of different pieces coming together. Certainly cooperating witnesses were an important part of the case, people who were part of that inner circle who could explain what happened. But I think that jurors look for corroboration when you have cooperating witnesses. And so the text messages, the bank records, and the invoices, I think all were very important to bringing it all together.
Now, Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson both insist that the government got it wrong, that they are innocent men. But yet, you said the jury said and felt differently. Where is the money, do you think?
Well, we found $840,000 in Kwame Kilpatrick's bank account that he couldn't account for, $500,000 in Bernard Kilpatrick's bank account that he couldn't account for, $1.2 million in a safe in Bobby Ferguson's office. So that's some of the money. Whether there's more money out there, I can't say, but certainly it cost the taxpayers, the city of Detroit, at least that much.
And Bob, any more money out there?
We're always looking. Of course, we certainly know that the stuff we have identified and the funds we have identified, we're working on seizing, and we'll work diligently on the rest.
And for the citizens of Detroit, is this really over?
Well, the case against Kwame Kilpatrick is really over. We'll continue to look for public corruption wherever it may lie. And so we just hope that today's case is not so much about the past, but about the future, and puts all of our public officials on notice that they're here to serve the people, not themselves.
All right. Barbara McQuaid, Bob Foley, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank you.
All right. Steve?
And what a long path it has been to get here. Remember way back in September, that's when this trial started. There were actually 4 defendants. Maybe you recall this guy, water boss Victor Mercado. He was right in the center of it for a time. He was charged with conspiracy. He was accused of taking bribes, but he wasn't part of it very long. About a month into the trial, he pleaded guilty. So what happens with him? Well, he is still awaiting sentence, and he could face up to 18 months in prison.
And we've got an entire section on clickondetroit.com. It's dedicated to the Kilpatrick guilty verdict. We've got reaction and certainly the next steps. You'll find the special coverage box on the home page. It's filled with information. And our coverage of the Kilpatrick trial verdict continues just ahead. They lived and breathed the Kilpatrick trial for more than 5 months of their lives, and coming up, what the members of the jury are saying about the verdict and how they came to their decision.
And delivering balloons to his mother's house, shouts of support from the streets. We'll see who continues to stand by Kwame Kilpatrick. That's when we come back.
Shortly after the Kilpatrick corruption trial verdict, members of the jury were seen getting dropped off in a parking lot, going to their cars and taking off. And tomorrow, when they wake up, they won't have to worry about heading to the courthouse for testimony or deliberations. Their service to the city is over.
Many, many months of hard work for those people. They did a good job. Several members of the jury did speak behind closed doors about the verdict and how they reached it. Joining us now live is local court defender Hank Winchester. Hank?
Steve Carmen, I'm sorry, the audio cut out here. I'm sorry, as you were introducing this piece here. Let me talk to you about this. It was very interesting to hear from the men and women of the jury, whether you agree or disagree with how things played out today. One thing is for sure, the men and women of this case were very dedicated. They showed up every day on time. They say they all took the judge's orders very seriously, not to pay attention to local media, and also to pay attention to the facts and the evidence of this case. And that is what they said they did. The jurors spoke when they delivered the verdict and then spoke in the courtroom afterwards to the media, answering questions for almost an hour, taking us further inside the case than we've ever been before. Watching these men and women interact with each other was impressive. It is clear they have great respect for each other. They were asked a variety of questions about the witnesses and the verdict. When asked if any witness or piece of evidence stood out, juror number 9 said, "We looked at the evidence as a whole. There wasn't one piece of evidence that sealed the deal." When asked if it was hard to avoid all the media coverage, juror number 1 said, "For me, it wasn't a big temptation. We were given rules, and we followed those rules." When asked what message the verdict sends, juror number 12 said, "If you want to do something illegal, a jury will make the correct decision." Juror number 11 said she had previously voted twice for Kwame Kilpatrick and said this about the case. She said, "I wouldn't call it anger. I would call it disappointment. I saw a lot of evidence that turned my stomach. I couldn't believe this was going on." She went on to say, "I feel bad for the children. I don't feel bad for any of the defendants." And that message echoed by many of the men and women that were on this jury. One other thing they were asked whether the presence of Carlita Kilpatrick and the Kilpatrick children in the courtroom during closing arguments, whether that played a role in their decision-making process. And all of the jurors responded by saying, no, not at all. Again, they were told to look at the facts and the evidence in this case, and they say that is exactly what they did in handing down this verdict. We're live here. Hank Winchester, back to you.
All right, and their job is over. Our Hank Winchester reporting for us live. Thank you, Hank. Well, Governor Snyder released a statement a short time ago regarding the corruption trial verdicts.
Yeah, the governor says, quote, "This is an unfortunate chapter in the city's history that is now closed. It's time to turn the page. The law enforcement and legal systems have done their jobs. We all need to focus on working together and helping move Detroit forward and being strong and successful again." Mayor Bing also released a statement. He says, "I am pleased that this long trial has ended and we can finally put this negative chapter in Detroit's history behind us. It's time for all of us to move forward with a renewed commitment to transparency and high ethical standards in our city government."
Well, there's much more ahead as we cover the Kilpatrick guilty verdicts and reaction. Coming up at 5:30, the impact this case has had on the city, and hear from some of Kwame Kilpatrick's family members now speaking out. Then at 6, a look at the rise and fall of Kwame Kilpatrick, a once promising young politician now headed to prison for likely a very long time.
I'm Chuck Gatica. Temp isn't bad, but we're still plenty drippy out there. 50 degrees, the current reading, 96% relative humidity, and currently we still have rain around. Doppler radar shows what's going on. We are seeing the rain end from southwest to northeast, but still some splotches of moderate to heavy shower activity out there. So we're not done yet. Tonight, overnight, it's mostly rain, although late we could see a few wet snowflakes mix in. Tomorrow, colder with flakes flying and still a chill. Get a load of these numbers for the day. High temp has hit 56 after midnight. 49 has been the low so far, so no matter how you look at it, there are the averages. We've been mild all the way around, even though we've been drippy. Temps now are mid-40s to near 50 as we go wide. Back out here, there it is. You can see the colder air, 30s, even some 20s, and a lot of that chilly air is going to wrap back in. There's a little stripe of snow shower activity. There's another one, all with this counterclockwise circulation around low pressure, so the moisture is pulling out. Computer model does a pretty good job showing that. There's the low now. Rain pulls out in the next couple of hours, but rotating around, not just overnight into the day tomorrow. Scattered snow showers, most of it light, but you thought we were done. Not quite yet. Nighttime low tonight gets us down to about 32 degrees, so we could still get a wet snow shower in there late. Daytime tomorrow, periodic snow showers as the colder air comes across the Great Lakes. 37 for the high. That's all we get. Most of this stuff's going to melt, even though it's light. And as we head for the next couple of days, notice temps go down for a couple days, and then they start meandering back up to near the averages. So all in all, not bad. But what a past couple of days when it comes to temperature. You know, it wasn't always dry, but it sure has felt good.
Yeah, sure did.
Spring is in the air.
Yeah.
What do you think? Well, coming up.
New at 6.
Book bags are usually filled with school supplies, but something a local 6th grader was packing had the school calling police.
Yeah, now it wasn't a weapon, but it was still pretty troubling for the people involved.
And our coverage of the Kwame Kilpatrick guilty verdicts continues. New at 6, the emotional scene playing out inside the courtroom that you haven't heard about. You know, you could feel it throughout the city as the guilty verdicts were handed down to Kwame Kilpatrick and the co-defendants.
And as it was felt here in Detroit, it was also heard around the nation and really around the world.
And Ruth joins us now. And Ruth, the verdicts made national headlines today, didn't they?
Yes, they did, and some international headlines as well. Carmen and Steve, this Kilpatrick case is making headlines on almost every news website that we've checked. Sometimes big and bold on the home page, but other times tucked away in a corner. Either way, these verdicts are a topic of conversation outside this area. This headline at the Huffington Post reads, Kwame Kilpatrick guilty. Former Detroit mayor found guilty in federal trial. The Washington Post headline reads, jury convicts ex-Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick of racketeering, conspiracy, corruption. And at the New York Daily News, disgraced former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick convicted of corruption charges, ensuring return to prison. And then across the pond at the UK Daily Mail, a lot more detail. This one reads, ex-Detroit Mayor convicted of corruption after he stole nearly $1 million and spent cash from charity for needy city residents on yoga lessons, golf clubs, and travel. So our ex-mayor is both famous and infamous tonight all around the world.
And who says that people are not interested in what goes on in the Motor City, huh? Not only here on our side of the pond, but across the pond as well.
Yeah, well, they were also such sweeping charges, you know, and RICO is so hard to prove, very hard to prove, and they did it, yeah.
We so need to move away from this as a city, don't we? Oh, boy.
Now we can.
Thank you, Ruth. Yeah, now we can.
All right, you're welcome.
We have much more coming up after the break, including some other local headlines.
An update, for example, on the West Bloomfield grandmother on trial accused of killing her grandson, what drug investigators say the teen used shortly before his killing.
And a plane high above downtown Detroit with a very specific message for Kwame Kilpatrick, who was behind this stunt.
And next, the impact his trial and now guilty verdict has had on the city of Detroit. We'll be back after this.
You're watching Local 4, home of ClickOnDetroit.com. WDIV Local 4 News at 5:30 starts now.
Well, on any other day, probably no one would notice that blue van on the highway, but today, former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick was inside, in custody, and right now he sits in a federal prison. The former mayor, once a very promising young politician, is now facing a long prison sentence, and he will remain in custody until that sentence is handed down.
Today, a jury convicted him of 24 federal counts, ranging from racketeering to extortion and mail fraud. His best friend, contractor Bobby Ferguson, also convicted on 9 counts. Kwame's father, Bernard Kilpatrick, convicted on 1 count of filing a false tax return.
And between the three, there are millions of dollars missing that belonged to the city of Detroit. Local 4's business editor, Rod Maloney, has a look now at the impact of this case on the people of Detroit. Rod?
Ruth, there are so many people who wonder what if, what could have been, had Bobby Ferguson and Kwame Kilpatrick decided to go in a decidedly different direction, what would the city look like? Well, it's fairly clear to say that it would probably look a whole lot better. Kwame Kilpatrick's shooting star was well on its way skyward in August 2005. That's when Local 4 exclusively found Ferguson Enterprise going full steam ahead. Bobby on the 40 under 40 list for 2004 by Crane's Detroit Business. He'd used his fleet of heavy construction equipment to work on Comerica Park, Ford Field, CompuWare, and MGM Casino before Kwame came along. But under Kwame, the questions swirled even then.
The relationship between the mayor and me is simple. He's a public official, and I believe in his vision, and I want to help the city move forward.
Bobby did help the mayor with something called the Motor City Makeover briefly, but somewhere along the line things changed. At first, Bobby did work and received millions, but the feds charged and the jury believed that Kwame Kilpatrick was forcing other contractors to include Ferguson for millions more, and he did no work at all. At the same time, Kwame was kicking the city's debt can down the road, deficit spending and borrowing to afford it. In one year, he tried to sell the Detroit side of the Windsor Tunnel to fund it. All the while, they kept up the altruistic front.
I'm a young African-American man in a city that is 85% population of African American people, and I believe that for your city to be a great city, the people in the city must work, but you also must give back. So I have no issues with volunteering my time.
Which, of course, leads us to tomorrow, when Detroit City Council will be heading off to Lansing to try and keep Governor Snyder from putting an emergency financial manager in place, trying to get the city's finances right. That was a whole lot of money that was missing, and certainly it had to have contributed in some small fashion. Back to you.
And Rod, how much do you think that this directly impacted Detroit's current financial crisis?
Well, the truth of the matter is, Ruth, when you consider that $100 million, which is roughly what the feds are saying they can't find right now, that's a drop in the bucket in the overall debt, because the city of Detroit's been in trouble for the past 50 years, really. It's been a long time in coming. But under Kwame Kilpatrick, the city got deeper and deeper into the red. He borrowed more and more money to try and move his agenda forward. And in the end, he was busy doing other things like having affairs and doing the other things that he's been convicted for that could have put the city in a different direction. It didn't end up going there, and now the city stands on the edge of emergency financial management.
Yeah, the whole thing is just a shame on so many levels. All right, thank you, Ron.
Certainly a lot of emotion from Kwame Kilpatrick's family today, as the former mayor is first found guilty and then placed immediately into custody. Paula Tutman joins us live now from outside his mother's Detroit home. Paula?
Hi, good evening to you. It seems like all of the visitors have left the former Congresswoman's home. Earlier today, it looked like the beginnings of some sort of repast. There was food going in, lots of visitors, but then very, very quickly, all of that vanished. If he didn't know this was the last time he would stay in his mother's house, he seemed to suspect it. Kwame Kilpatrick's mood was solemn as he left the home to get to court with 30 minutes to spare.
Can you tell us how you're feeling?
Just your thoughts for today. Just your thoughts on the day. Usually dapper with layers of fashion, he was decidedly dressed down. Simple slacks, no hat, no overcoat, no flair. If federal court was ground zero for emotion, the home of the former Congresswoman has been an all-day close cousin. At one point, a call from inside the house went out to 911. The house was swarming with Detroit police officers. And while a passerby and voter walked by complaining that he doesn't see this kind of response when he's had to call 911.
How much money could we have used as far as police department for the city, for the people of the city of Detroit?
When the police did arrive, Kwame's mother emerged and swiftly got into a car. It would be a sad return around 3:30 without her son. Ray Cheeks, Kwame's uncle, was the only one who actually stopped to speak.
The jury got it wrong, the prosecution got it wrong. The man's done nothing. I told him take care, have good faith, trust in God.
Sir, what can you tell have you talked to his sons? Have you talked to his?
Yes, I have.
What have they said?
They feel very sad. It's a very big blow for them and an extremely big blow for the city of Detroit. The city of Detroit will now be destroyed.
Why do you say that?
Read your Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, there you go. This family insists everyone else got it wrong. No apology, because none felt. Perhaps the only sense of real sorrow here on LaSalle Street on the city's west side is the fact that if indeed Kwame Kilpatrick gets 20 years, if his sentence runs concurrently, so remember he's been convicted of 24 charges, but if that sentence runs concurrently and he does indeed spend 20 years in jail, he will be 62 years old by the time he returns to this house. His mother will be close to 90. This is life-altering time. And when I said repast earlier, because this most certainly must feel like a death to this family. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Paula. Both residents and Detroit city leaders have a lot to say about the verdict today. Most of them agreeing that this is a first big step in really turning the city around for better times.
Our Roger Weber is live tonight with that. And Roger, you've been taking the pulse of Detroiters and also their reaction to these guilty verdicts.
Well, just about everybody I talked to is telling me that the jury got this one right. They say Kwame Kilpatrick, who was elected twice to lead the city from the building behind me, let down Detroit and deserves prison. At the Omega Grill in northwest Detroit, the verdict brought a restrained celebration.
You know, you stuck your hand in the cookie jar and you got caught. I didn't think it had happened that way, but it did, and I'm glad of it. So
I think it might give other politicians pause, not to be so quick to try to take advantage of the people.
I believe that he was railroaded.
Two men sitting next to each other had a friendly debate.
I think people who break the law like that should be treated as common criminals, not like celebrities.
I think it was a media lynching, you know, and I don't really think that he was any worse than a lot of our public officials that we have today.
But he was the only person in the restaurant who openly criticized the verdict.
People who are characters don't ride in on the back of people who have a character. Kwame got what he deserves.
He was good when he first started. I think he just got greedy a little.
Councilmember Santil Jenkins, who's out of town, said the Kilpatrick story is like a Greek tragedy.
Kwame Kilpatrick had unlimited potential, and those talents had been used to improve our city, then we would be in a much better place right now.
And let's check some more reaction from elected leaders. Gary Brown, Detroit City Council Pro Tem, says Detroiters who have faced betrayal by an elected official and the dark clouds over our city should feel relief now. Fred Durhal, State Representative, says you have to obey the law and hold yourself to the highest ethical standards, and if you don't, you pay the consequences. Finally, Benny Napoleon, the Wayne County Sheriff, says we must place this unfortunate saga in our rearview mirror and look ahead toward transforming the city of Detroit. Reporting live in downtown Detroit, I'm Roger Weber, Local 4.
All right. Thank you so much, Roger. As you heard, not everybody is convinced of Kwame Kilpatrick's guilt.
Our cameras recorded one woman this afternoon leaving balloons at Kwame's mother's home. Balloons shaped like hearts that said, "I love you." The woman said she was devastated by the verdict and that she supports Kwame and his family. She told our Paula Tupman, who's been out there this afternoon, that she doesn't actually know the former mayor personally. And then there's this opposite end of the spectrum reaction, a crude message from the radio show Mojo in the Morning. They apparently hired a plane to tow the message, "Don't drop the soap," high above downtown Detroit.
Let's go now to two of our Local 4 experts for more perspective on the verdicts.
Yeah, joining us now is Sheila Cockrell and Mildred Gaddis. Ladies, thank you for joining us this afternoon. Sheila, first to you. You were on City Council very early on. You were a critic of then Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick. So I can't imagine much of this development today is a surprise for you.
No, it's not a surprise, but it's unfortunate. It is good that this trial is now over and we can move forward. But at the end of the day, it's a tragedy, and it's just really unfortunate that the city was put through by the Kilpatrick administration what it was.
And Mildred, you and I were talking in the newsroom earlier about some slings and arrows that you went through early on from folks who were very upset with you because you were kind of warning the people of Detroit about Kwame Kilpatrick. Can you talk a little bit about that on air?
Well, you know what? I really'd rather not, Ruth. I will just say this to you, and that is that the signs were there very, very early. Kwame Kilpatrick consistently made decisions, was proved to be very detrimental to the city of Detroit, and nobody seemed to have had a problem with it. Not Detroit City Council, not the power brokers in the city, and at every level, we can go back as far as credit cards. There were just so many examples, and it wasn't until the very end of his tenure that people began to jump off ship and to talk about what a horrible guy he was. And it is true, I did get those funeral flowers the day after his election, telling me, suggesting and inviting me to have a good life. I am not excited about what happened today. I think that what has occurred in this city is very, very tragic for the city of Detroit. And it will be a time for the city to heal, but the city of Detroit will heal.
Sheila and Mildred, same question for both of you. Sheila, I'll ask you first. Just how important do you feel this is for the city in terms of putting this all behind us finally and moving on in a good direction?
I think it's really important. There's so much going on that is so positive and so progressive that, you know, it's good to get this behind us. I would also want to note that there were members of council who were raising concerns about many of the decisions that were getting made in the first term as well as early in the second term. There was a growing concern that this was a group of people who were using the city for personal gain and not for the benefit of the people of the city.
Mildred, same question to you. How important is this?
You know, Detroit will heal, and I can say to you that the people who are upset about today's verdicts, that percentage is quite small, and I think that's evidenced by the great number of people who did not show up at his mother's home, the great number of people who were not standing outside federal court when the judge made her ruling at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
All right. Well, ladies, we thank you so much for being with us today. What you have to say, I think, really has a lot of meaning because, pardon me, I'm sorry, because you have been here for many, many years, and because you care so very much about the men and the women and the children who live here in Detroit, and as well as those of us who work here in the city of Detroit. You really have a heart for the city, and so we appreciate your comments very much and your perspective very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Mildred.
Coming up ahead here at 6, by the way, much more on these verdicts and also where Kwame Kilpatrick and Bobby Ferguson are right now. Plus, we're going to take a closer look at the rise and fall of the former mayor.
And there are other local stories making headlines tonight. Among them, tomorrow, another huge day for the city of Detroit. We'll see why all eyes will be on Lansing.
And the West Bloomfield grandmother accused of killing her teenage grandson back in court on trial for murder. The drug investigators say the teen took before his death. Well, the trial of Sandra Lane, the West Bloomfield grandmother charged with murdering her grandson, continued today with the testimony focusing on the victim, the 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman.
Some really crucial testimony from Oakland County's assistant medical examiner who says Hoffman suffered 5 gunshot wounds. He died when bullets pierced his lungs and he could not breathe. The county's chief forensic toxicologist says Hoffman did not appear under the influence of drugs at the time because although traces of synthetic marijuana were in his urine, there were no traces in his blood.
Since there were no synthetic cannabinoids in the blood, only in the urine, then at the time of death, or what's called the peri-mortem period, that time at or around when death occurred, the decedent would not have been under the influence of K2 spice.
Now, the defense has not yet begun to present its case. Sandra Lane is expected to take the stand. That could happen tomorrow.
Well, coming up tomorrow, another major day for the future of Detroit because that's when City Council is going to go to Lansing to appeal the financial review team's findings that Detroit is in need of an emergency financial manager. Now, sometime after that meeting, there's the chance that Governor Snyder will announce whether an emergency financial manager will be appointed. Mayor Bing has gone on record against this appeal, saying it's time to stop the fighting and accept the fact that an emergency financial manager will take over the city's finances. In fact, the mayor tweeted this morning, an emergency manager can't come in here and run this city without the help and support of teammates. I'll be a teammate. My executive staff will be a teammate. What we need to figure out is not fighting, but the person over the person, but how do we get along to make wins for the citizens in the city of Detroit? And you can count on Local 4 and click on Detroit.com for live coverage of tomorrow's hearing and also the outcome in Lansing.
New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg has lost his personal battle in a war on obesity. A judge has tossed out the mayor's ban on extra-large sugary drinks. A New York State Supreme Court justice called the ban arbitrary and capricious, saying there would be uneven enforcement and loopholes in the rule. The ban on sugary drinks larger than 16 ounces was supposed to take effect tomorrow. The American Beverage Association and other businesses had gone to court to stop it.
All right, Chuck is here now to take a look at the forecast. And, sir, it was rainy today and gray. And
yeah.
What's going to happen?
That kind of wrapped up your whole day, right? You stuck your head out there, right there. You put your head out the Hanson's window, and then you got wet. That was it. Yeah, we're looking now really at Belle Isle, and you can see we're still kind of drippy in spots outside. Doppler radar confirms we certainly have the clouds around. Showers with the heavier stuff migrating north. There are still some splotches of moderate to heavy rain. But as we take a look at a live camera picture, a little different angle from Windsor back across, even though we've got light raindrops, look at the speed at which these low clouds are moving. The breezes will pick up as we head for the day tomorrow, they're going to wrap around with a little colder air, but currently we're still at 50 degrees. Low pressure to the north as that thing pulls out. This counterclockwise flow shifting to a west-southwesterly wind will help to initiate a few widely scattered snow showers, and that's called a trough of low pressure. That's got to swing back through as well the next couple of days. So occasionally we get some light, wet snow showers. 32 for a low tonight. You may see a wet snowflake late. Daytime tomorrow, on again, off again, light snow. 37 the high, so a lot of that stuff's going to melt when it hits the ground. We advance to 7 days, and notice temperatures do take a quick little dip, and then they head back up again. So there you are. Not really anything that's eventful except for the rain we've got. Yeah.
Just kind of get through another week.
Good. We've had enough events.
I know. Yeah. See ya.
Starting tomorrow, all eyes will be on the Vatican as the Cardinals begin the process of electing a new pope.
Just how long could this conclave last, and what's it all about? That's next.
The conclave of cardinals at the Vatican opens tomorrow, and by this time tomorrow, the cardinals will probably be in the middle of their secret voting as they choose the next pope.
Yeah, the conclave takes place inside the Sistine Chapel, and once it begins, all eyes will turn to that now famous chimney up on the roof. That's because the smoke will tell the world when a new pope is chosen. We've gotten so many calls and emails. How does this work, this whole conclave? So we're going to make this very simple. There are a total of 115 cardinals who are eligible to vote. All the voting cardinals are under the age of 80. It's a simple election. That's really what it is. 2/3 majority required to win, and that means 77 votes must go for the same person. If a majority is not reached, the voting ballots are treated with a special chemical, makes them black. So when they set it on fire, black smoke goes up the chimney, and everybody knows they're going to have to vote again.
And then if the 77 votes needed are achieved, the ballots are burned without the chemical, and the smoke is white. And that signals that a new pope has been elected. No one knows how long this process is going to take. It could be hours, but more likely days. However, one conclave in the 1200s took nearly 3 years.
Whoa. Well, Devin's going to be over in Rome for a long time, I guess. I'm going to get used to working nights. Devin is in Rome covering the conclave, and I suspect it will be about a week. They want this done by Easter time. Devin will have live reports from the Vatican starting tomorrow morning at 5:30. He will also be blogging about this whole experience, so be sure to follow Devin at clickondetroit.com.
Local 4 News at 6 is coming along next.
And let's check in with Carmen, see what's coming up all brand new.
All right. Well, Steve and Ruth, this was a shocker. A local middle school student carrying a lot more than lunch money. Coming up new at 6, the backpack stuffed with thousands in cash. Plus, the defenders live on the Kilpatrick verdict. Hey?
Hi, Carmen. The jury has spoken in the Kilpatrick corruption case, and now members of the jury speaking out to members of the media. They're going to take you inside the courtroom. Coming up live.
Handcuffed and hauled off to prison, Kwame Kilpatrick is guilty. We have this story covered from every angle. It's coming up next.